Alright, so what is the difference between ARM and a melody? I already told you in the beginning. It's just that it's not playing all of the time. So I will just duplicate this MIDI information over here so we keep it and we can use it later on. Now I will pretty randomly just delete a couple of notes here in the second part of our first bar. So let's do that. And now let's have a short listen. And now it already feels more like a melodic theme and less like an arpeggio, even though the notes are in the style of an arpeggio, okay? And now we could do this everywhere, you know, and then we had a really like simple theme there that's repeating over time. Let's just increase the volume a little bit. Alright, this can already be a small melodic theme, but of course we want to make this a lot more interesting than it is at the moment. So why is it not interesting at the moment? It's not interesting at the moment because of several reasons. This is always the same. So we have this dum bum bum, and it's repeating in the exact same way afterwards. And then we have the exact same motion, and by motion I mean like those three notes are going up and here they're going up again. And they're all starting here on the 1, and exactly the same thing is happening here again, and here again, and here again. So this is kind of boring because it's super predictable. So it's also kind of satisfying, and this is something that can be a little bit tricky when writing melodies. You want to make something that sounds familiar, but you don't want to create something that sounds boring and predictable. So this is something you have to find out by yourself, and of course you have to find out by yourself what kind of melodies and arps you like, but I want to just give you some tools at hand so you can find out. Alright, so what do? I would say let's just start alternating some of those notes and just also get rid of some. So let's get rid of the second one. I'm just randomly getting rid of some here. And we could say, okay, let's get rid of the second one here again. It would make it maybe a little bit boring, but also satisfying. So let's have a listen. Alright, so this already makes it a little bit more interesting. So let's just start alternating those notes in the second part of our first melody part here, which is this one. Alright, so we know that we are in E minor, so the notes that we can pick are of course all of the notes of the scale, and I don't want to give you any rule about like what note you should use, because if it sounds good for you, please stick to it, okay? This is nothing I will tell you. But there are some notes that will sound better than others. So there are consonant notes and there are dissonant notes. Or let's say not notes but intervals, because one note cannot be dissonant. It's just like the whole thing, the summing of all the notes that can sound more consonant, more dissonant, which is totally like there's no good or bad in consonants or dissonance, okay? It's just an effect. So people like film composers, they use dissonance all the time, and we can even use it in our compositions. So as I said earlier, consonant intervals are the 8th, which is the octave, the 5th and the 3rd. And where do you know from which interval we're going up from or down from? Well, this is an E minor chord. So now we're looking at those notes from the perspective of the E. So the E is the root note of our chord, and the most stable one. So from the E, a 5th will be the B, and the 3rd will be the G. So E, G, and B, they will be the notes that will sound most stable. Stable also means boring, okay? We can decide if we want to stay on a more stable note or if we want to go to a more unstable note. Okay, so let's go up to a also very stable note, which is the B here. And melody-wise, it makes sense that you don't make too big steps here, which is in this case a little bit hard because we can either keep this smaller step here, or we can transpose the F sharp up to the A, and then we have a smaller step between those notes, but a bigger step between those notes. So we can also just start by adjusting this note going up. And now our melody line here is just a half step, and this is just a 3rd up here, which is a less of a jump than an E, which we had here. So let's have a listen. So So this, for example, is a super huge jump here. So if we want to adjust this melody a little bit, we'll just drag it down and maybe don't make it that boring. And with boring, I mean like there are those two notes repeating here again and those two notes. So this is, yeah, it's also okay, but I just want to show you a way to make it a little bit more interesting. Cool, so let's just transpose this note up here. And now we're in bar 3, which means we're in B minor. The D will be a very stable note there, the F sharp as well. And the B, of course. So we can start transposing this note up here. We have a kind of a big jump here, but we will hear how it sounds like. Alright, so this jump here is again super huge. So let's just try to be a little bit more calm there. Let's transpose this down to an A, which will sound pretty good because it's the root note of the A major chord. Alright, so now we have our pretty similar motions in our first one, this one, and the third one. And like the second and fourth one, they're not so closely related to each other, but they have both, like the lowest note it's getting repeated 2 times. So we kind of have like an A-B thing. A-B, A-B. Alright, so to create a little bit more of a sparkle, I would like to have one note that pops out a little bit more, okay? And I think it could be a note here in the third bar, or starting in the third bar. But this can be wherever you want. So I think like melody shape-wise, there should be like one highlight. There shouldn't be highlights all the time, but if you have like one highlight, it can really stick out more. So let's try to make a note that is a little bit higher than the other ones there, which will create this highlight. Cool, so now we're in our B minor chord section here. And now let's try to get up to this D, which is the minor third of our B, which will sound good. And now I think we should transpose all notes up. And so now we're coming from this A here in the second bar, dropping down. Now it's an F that cannot work out. We're in B minor, so we should drop down to a D. But then we have a huge jump here. All right, well, let's have a listen. I will just increase the feedback of the echo a little bit, so with more tail. Yes, that's good. Let's increase the release of the amp a little bit. All right. Cool. So I think what's a little bit too predictable at the moment is that we have we have a lot of motion every time each new bar starts. So first bar, we have something going on like a run, and then we have a run in the second bar and the third and the fourth. So what we can do to get rid of this is just deactivating like a lot of notes in our second and our fourth bar. Because now we're getting into the realms of question and answer or call and response. Now we have something that is calling, which is this part. And we have a part that is responding just with one note, but it's still responding. Okay, that's very important. And then we have a call again, slightly different than the first call we had, but still this kind of the same response as in the first one. So call and response. Just to lose a couple of words about call and response. Call and response originated, and I'm not an expert on this, but this is how I understood it from African music, but not only African music, also from like a more of like African lifestyle, which was like people were discussing in their community something. So one was like yelling something, like a question, and then everyone was reacting either positive or negative to it. So the point I want to make is call and response, question and answer, it's deeply rooted in our human behavior. So we're always searching for question and answer and call and response in music automatically, like our brain does it. That's something I read online. So just giving away a little bit information that I collected by myself. So the brain is always searching for call and response, and why not giving the brain call and response, because it will sound pretty cool. Another thing to make call and response work well is that the call needs to be, so call and response is deeply rooted in our brains, and humans are like by nature searching for it everywhere they can. So why not giving those brains, the goodie and creating some nice call and response. So how do we create some nice call and response? Call and response, they need to be a little different. So the more different like your answer is to your question, the bigger of course the difference will be between those two, and the higher the effect will be. So this is something that will happen right now, because we have a call in the beginning, and this is getting like more into like a style-wise advice now, because how you want to structure your call or your response or your question or your answer, this is totally up to you. Do you want to have like a super busy call and a very, very simple response? That's up to you, you know, even in melodic house. I have the feeling that in general melodic house, if you watch Ben Böhmer or if you listen to Ben Böhmer, he is like very spare calls and responses, so there's nothing too crazy going on there all the time. But there are some call and response pattern, even sometimes between, like there's the call and then like some chord or some percussion is giving the response. And this is something that happens also like in more up-tempo, techno-ish style productions, where you have like a rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat, and then you have a percussion that is like you know, so they're like imitating and speaking with each other. I think you know some tracks that go like that. All right, so in this example, we have our call here. Let's listen again. And now we're just answering with one note. Let's open up the frequency a little bit more. And we can put the synth to mono here, so we can increase the release time and it's not muddying up with the other notes, because there's only one voice that can be played at a time. Let's just increase the decay time of the second envelope a little bit more, and also the release time. Make it a little bit smoother. Alright, so this is a pretty easy example of question and answer, and it is pretty close to the one that I showed you in the beginning, which is this main melody right here. Let's just copy this over real quick. Oops. And now this. Okay, so this is kind of a similar approach right there. Alright, so I think we can leave this example where it is and now start really creating some question and answer melodies, always starting with our ARP. So let's delete this MIDI clip, let's copy this over. Cool. So now we have our MIDI information again, and as I said, we want to make a difference between our call and our response. So let's just use the first three notes for our call. And I mean, even though we're just deleting some notes, and even though there's not so much changing except the pitch here, because the rhythm it's exactly the same here, you know? It's just the first triplet eighth notes getting played, but it's already like a small response there. It's like dum bum bum, and there's like da da da. So this is something that happens so much in music, and I really want to emphasize that the important thing here is you have to have a story in mind that you want to tell, because now we have endless possibilities, endless. And this is, of course, the hard thing in music, because we all want to have some rules, and now I try to give you some rules of thumb. But in the end, I think it helps if you imagine some pictures, you know. So do you want to say, is there a person that says a lot? So it has a lot to tell, okay? So maybe it would continue speaking here, you know. So now there's a too little like space between the question and the answer. You know, or is it very like, you know, quirky and it's always jumping around. And then there's this person who's just responding with one note. Okay, so maybe you can develop that picture in your mind a little bit further, and I think this is something that old producers like Mozart did, because, for example, if you listen to Rondo alla Turca, it's a track from Mozart where he was musically describing a war scene between the Turkish and another nation. I don't know exactly which nation, and if the Turkish people were the people defending or the people in the offensive. But if you listen to the track with knowing that, you can really like hear in the music, you can hear like this a lot of fights going on and people running and all that stuff, So a very busy track, and that's of course like, watch out for the names of those classical pieces. Oftentimes they describe a situation, and this can help. So if you are like watching like a picture or something, you try to recreate that picture. For example, a picture of a wave or of the sea or something. It's like the sea, it's very just one color. It's just moving very slightly. So if you would like to have the same of like kind of vibe in your track, you would try to not make too much changes. Try to stay kind of the same, but you have a lot of different small motions in your track going on. But if you wanna recreate like a meteor going down to Earth, you would maybe have really deep and very fast frequency changes. And yeah, you can apply this to picking your instruments, to writing your melodic lines, to everything. But I think this just helps to clarify the picture. All right, so let's stop with this philosophical session and let's continue with our ARP here. So what have we done here? Okay, so there are some notes that are not working out here, which is I think this C sharp here. So let's transpose this down to the B, which is the fifth of the E. What always works, or with works I mean what is always finishing a sentence, is if you stop with a consonant note on a downbeat, on a strong beat. So strong beats are 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, oops, and so on. So now, because we're stopping on this G here, it's really like dun, 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 dun. It's not a very open phrase, right? So if we just deactivate this G with hitting 0 real quick, let's have a listen. Now it's more open. Another thing that you can do to spice up your melodies a little bit is to try to implement notes in those last like quarter of your previous takt. So another thing to spice up your melodies is that you can make like small melody fills. So in the end of like 8 bars or 4 bars or 2 bars, sometimes like a drummer or instrumentalist would play like they're playing all the time the same pattern on a piano or on the drum, and then he's like, And this is something we can do with melodies as well, to like lead into the next tone. So if we want to lead into this D, we could start like putting just a drop down melody here that leads kind of into our D. And now we can like dun da 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 dun 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 dun. We can like start earlier and then go. Now it's a little bit boring because those notes are exactly the same. In the third bar we are now in B minor here, so maybe we just start with a B here. And now I think I would go a little bit higher here. I mean, we're now pretty like stuck in this shape that we've made, like this dun 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 dun. So this is like our melodic theme that we have now, which will sound familiar, but we're not getting like, we cannot do something completely different right here because it would sound a little bit weird. Like just 3 notes repeating and then going 1 note down or something. This would be like too far out. We can do it. Let's just do it real quick. But let's listen to this one more time and then we'll do this example that will not work so well. Now ending here on 1 note again and going down maybe. Alright, so this could work out, for example. So let's delete those notes, and if we would start like here with a completely different theme, something like 3 notes and then going up 1 note, and let's just adjust it to the right pitch, which would be the F sharp in this case. Would sound, I mean, it doesn't even sound that bad, but it's something too different. So without further talking, let's delete this MIDI clip and let's do another example where we will not like put like a run melody style, arpeggio melodic kind of theme, but something that repeats a little bit more.